Our next interview is one scheduled with the Commissioner for Works, Rural Roads, and the Chief Image Maker of Delta State in his office as Commissioner for Public Information. Joining us virtually on the program this morning is Mr. Charles Aniagwu. Hello, good morning to you, Commissioner, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Nigerians. How are you today, my brother?
Very well, thanks for asking, sir. There are two issues which we would like to discuss. I know your schedule is very tight, but I must appreciate you for taking out time to give us your attention to this issue. First off, it's the controversy surrounding the government's memo to civil servants on the code of dressing. Some news publications have said that the government has outlawed keeping beards. Others are saying that females within the civil service are not allowed to paint their nails or wear artificial hair. And now we're talking to you, the Commissioner of Public Information. Could you help set the record straight? What is the intention of this memo? And particularly, does it speak to the dressing code of civil servants?
Thank you very much for raising this issue with us. And we do appreciate you and other media houses that have also reached out to us and what we are trying to achieve. And I'm happy looking at you this morning. I know that what you are putting on, looking so good, is not the same thing you wear when you want to swim in a swimming pool. Or perhaps when you are working out in a gym, that's not what you put on. So that tells you that different situations, different environments, and different moments cause for different dress pattern and code. In the case of the issues referred to, the civil servants in Delta State are governed by, number one, the Nigerian Constitution applies to them. The laws of the state applies to them. The laws made by the National Assembly applies to them. But specifically, with respect to the civil servants, the civil service rules applies to them. And in chapter 1 of that particular rule, particularly code 01001, it is clear that the rules and the different chapters in these particular civil service rules applies to every civil servant in Delta State, except, of course, where there are other variations made by individuals who are recognized by law to bring about such variations. For instance, if you come to the issue of dressing, that takes you to page 42, where you have code 04314. That speaks specifically to the fact that our civil servants are supposed to be decently dressed whenever they are in the office or engage in activities that suggest that they are representing the state government. In which case, if you are in a and you are not there in your official capacity, we don't bother what you are going to put on. That becomes the responsibility of the minders of the church. If you are also proceeding with your children or with your friends or alone to a place where there are games or to some swimming pool, with the kind of a swimming trunk, and ditto if you decide in the evening to even walk out, you are coming to the office. So if you decide to put on a spaghetti hand or strap as a lady, we care less. As a man, you decide to wear some tattered jeans, at that moment it's not our business. But the moment you are going to be representing us as a corporate entity, we insist that you must be decent because you must be able to portray us decently. A good example as well, what you see in the banks. I gave an example the other day that of the bank. You dare not, even if you are the MD, to go and put on a tie that is green in color when you know that Zenith deals with red. Ditto Fidelity Bank that deals with green. And so what at the risk of advertising them, that any given rules that work. When these individuals appear to be interviewed for them to be employed, they didn't put on rags. Each time they are commission interview, they look well dressed. So why would they want to change the goalpost in the middle of the game and begin to come to the office with some green hair, yellow hair? Sometimes they paint the hair red. And so if at all you must do that, you must find one way of protecting it. When you leave the office, if you paint it to turn your hair to ash, we will not live outside the and outside you performing any official function. On the issue of the beard, we are not saying you can't keep the beard, but it must be well trimmed. You must be able to maintain it. Don't just come and begin to do some form of Aristotle for us, where at the end of the day, you are not a good example of the Delta State government. Those are the issues.
But I don't know if you've seen the position of the Delta State chapter of the Nigerian Labour Congress, led by its chairman, Mr. Goodluck Ofurubuku, who says that the government should consider providing wardrobe allowances if they are to sustain this policy, that the current take-home of Delta State civil servants might not allow for them to wear suits to work every day or be able to keep up with the grooming required to look presentable at work. What's your reaction to his position on the matter, sir?
Before recognize the fact that Ofurubuku indeed represents the labor force, but we must remind him and any other person who want to push up that argument that the memo in question is not new. It's just a reminder. As far back as almost 20 years ago during the Ibori administration, there were dress codes that were spelled out. Sometime in 2009, in the Udwan administration, there was a lot of emphasis on that dress code. What this particular memo or circular is trying to show that in 2000 we were clear on the need for people to be decent. And in any case, some of these other things they wear to the office that does not look decent enough are even sometimes much more expensive than the ones you are mentioning. We are not also insisting that all categories of staff must be put on suit. Do you know, due to my brother, that even lawyers, when they are even going to eat, people who eat food, there is even a dress pattern for them, that if you don't dress that way, you are not qualified to be part of that pattern if the lawyers are involved. So if lawyers can always look good, doctors always look good, we also want our civil servants to also look good. When it comes to issue of payment, we are about number one in terms of advance in this country. Wage, when the federal government was talking about 70,000, we took ours as 7,000. We are among the first to start. We are also among the very few carrying out and faithfully so, the contributory pension scheme. At the moment, when they were challenging, we started off certain civil servants. Today, as we speak, there are certain categories of civil servants that do not come to work more than 2 or 3 times the government to be able to leave some money in their pockets. So, my brother, the issue is not about whether people can afford the issues we are talking about. To our brothers, this individual we are talking about, they go to other functions, they go to, the money is made from the office, they go to those other centers, they go to party, they dress well, they go to wedding, they dress well, they engage in other activities, they dress well, but from where the is being made for you to be able to buy all those other very good looking dresses that you put on, we think that at least that environment also deserves that level of decency, so that at the end of the day, giving you occupy. And don't forget, the civil service is a regimented service. It's controlled by rules. And so not a free commerce or where you just come and then do whatever you like. It is governed by rules.
Topic of discussion. One last issue raised by Mr. Goodluck was the issue of non-consultation. It's happening at a time, coincidentally, where unionization is a big subject matter in today's world. It started with Nupeng Dangote. In Delta, is the state government mandated to consult with the arm of the NLC or other trade unions when it's reintroducing, or you're saying it's not a new policy, when it's reminding civil servants of an existing policy? Is there a mandated rule that says there should be consultation with trade unions?
Very clear that in Delta State, we have always carried our civil servants along because we see them as partners. Our governor is somebody who believes in the harmony that exists in the civil service, because we see them as the engine room of government. And the welfare packages the governor has also unfolded in the course of time speaks to that, his belief that it's a very important arm of government. I will continue to hold them in that high regard. Like I said, this is just a reminder of what has already been in existence before now. And in any case, once the circular was also, which was done by the head of service in her capacity as the #1 civil servant in the state, and she's also rightly empowered to give out that particular to issue. beyond issuing the circular, there have also been a whole lot of interaction about it. I am aware that she engaged a top echelon of the civil service, principally permanent secretaries, all with a view to letting them know that, to sensitizing them further as to the mode of implementation. Individuals do not go overboard to begin to carry out implementation outside the expectations of government, or fall short of the desires of government to make it known to everybody that we expect some decency. Today, if you are coming into a state secretariat, even if you are not a civil servant, once at the entrance of the building, if you go to a club, people care about what you put on. If you are going to swim, there are things you can put on, but I've never seen any babariga or abada. So, which means even certain things that apply. If you are involved in the game of football, you may need to put on. I have not seen anybody who is in a football field wearing abada. So we must come to terms that environment where you yourself determines what you wear. Even as a commissioner, if I'm going to carry out inspection of roads or road projects, I don't put on the kind of dress I'm putting on now, except if that particular inspection is impromptu or unplanned. But if it is planned, I can put on jeans, put on some form of t-shirts, or possibly fold it up to fold up the sleeves to suit the kind of assignment I am carrying out at that moment. So we must that if there are issues by those who are trying to draw some heavy weight out of this circular, they should make it because we want people to be decent in the workplace. I'm telling you what color of uniform. I'm telling you anything you put on must, at least whatever you are putting on, must be decent enough as spelled out in that particular circular.
Commissioner, sir, for setting the record straight and the intent of the government in that direction. We have less than a quarter of an hour. Let's talk about the industrial drive under the Governor Sheriff Oborewore-led administration with the bilateral relations with Brazil. Last time you were here in our studio, you were hopeful that it would be an eventful deliberation. Now that you're back, can we get the updates on what has been actualized following that handshake?
The last station I spoke to before I left for in the company of my other colleagues, we were led by our governor. And coming back, I've been quite busy. I've not had time to also appear on any other station. You are also the first I'm talking to, which means you knew about my going, and now you are now also being informed about our coming back. Now, I also told you in the course of that our government have been very, very heavy on infrastructure. We have been able to open up a number of our rural communities, which is why in our budgeting processes, we usually reserve certain portion of funds, not in over 2 billion, for the purpose of constructing rural roads to link up our rural communities within each. So every local government has more than 2 billion for the purpose of internal roads within that local government. That, of course, is without prejudice to other funds in excess of 200 billion that deploy for the purpose of constructing roads that links local government and a number of local government areas. So we're able to record what we saw or the appreciable progress in that regard. We felt there was a need to now begin to look into other areas that will further diversify our economy. We believe that those infrastructural effort of the administration has to a very large extent created the enabling environment for those industrialists or investors to thrive. And Brazil came to mind. The governor had before that time accompanied Mr. President to Brazil, and in the course of that visit of Mr. President, our governor on the sideline of that visit took out time to discuss with a number of investors and individuals who are holding sway, particularly with respect to the economy of Brazil. And so, by the time he came back, he spoke and he said that we need for us to explore opportunities in that regard, particularly with Brazil being heavy in agriculture. And the government also mentioned that there are two things that he wants to achieve with that particular effort. One is the insecurity. The number of bushes that are not occupied, more or less they look like ungoverned spaces because nobody is farming in those areas. or even when they do, they are just scattered farm settlements. So it became attractive to some marauders to either kidnap people and run into the forest. Very, very unsuitable for our farmers to do some form of subsistence and commercial agriculture. And he felt that if we're able to have large farms, bringing together some cooperatives or an individual farmer who engage in large-scale farming, we would have been able to bring about a situation where you could bring some forest rangers and at the same time reduce the thickness of those forests and make them unattractive for individuals who may want to become dangerous human beings in our forest. So which means by bringing in large-scale farmers into our state, we would have also been able to fight insecurity. Secondly, and equally important, is the need for us to also use the agricultural sector to create more jobs for our people, for those who will work in these farms, or those who would have been able to also garner some experience from these bigger farmers and possibly set up their own mini farm.
And all that we are still discussing. We are also very, very heavy in our discussion with respect to energy, and we record that before we left, just as I appeared before you, that I told you about what we're doing with the REA. We had a stakeholder forum before we departed, and even while we came back, we also had meetings with some persons who are quite heavy in the renewable energy sector. So all these, my brother, form the gamut of what took us to Brazil. And today, we are still pushing through so that in the not too distant time, we're able to begin to realize the objectives that the governor has set before us.
Well, I must thank you, Commissioner Sir, for prioritizing this feedback. It's a privilege to be the first station to get this update. But I'd like to dig even further. I know of the 25 local government areas in Delta, there's vast agrarian potential. But is there a timeline on which of the local governments might be witnessing the pilot phase of this ranching model and their hopes of replicating it across Nigeria with the coming on board of the Ministry of Livestock? Would there be synergies between Delta State government and the federal government to replicate across board?
Well, what is most important, first of all, is that our governor has shown a whole lot of a political will to be able to drive home this initiative. And because we also informed our people back home, even while we were in Brazil, about the efforts we were making, and good enough, we needed to do that in line with the governor's transparency posture on a number of issues. So a number of our local government areas are really angling to be the first to have a bite on these initiatives. Even yesterday, one of the local governments reached out to me asking that they are already sourcing for farmlands, because you know that because of the land tenure system, you have a whole lot of our farmlands in individual farm holdings. So we need to be able to go into some form of land acquisition as well, of course in consultation with our people. There are some other areas where the state government has before now acquired some farmlands that are available, readily available for any of these sectors to come in. So even if somebody is asking for as much as 20 or 30 hectares of land for the purpose of establishing a very big ranch, or you're having to have the feedlot, all those things are readily available. But by the time we have one, have two, that now other individuals will have been able to see the model. We believe that at that time, every other state that is interested in what we are trying to push through in Delta, which we are confident that by the level of interaction we've had and the level of enthusiasm expressed by the individuals we interacted with in Brazil, that a little push will bring this to fruition. Though we will still be requiring the effort of the federal government, particularly in terms of the sanitary protocol. Because if you are bringing in animals, there are certain rules that govern it. Today, what they have is that you can afford to maybe transfer the embryo, but you are not able to bring in an already existing stock. But perhaps we are thinking also of reaching out to the federal government through the Federal Ministry of Livestock to see the need, if we want to fast track the process, to bring in some heads, even if it's not going to be a continuous process, so that once those heads come in, it takes a shorter gestation period for them to begin to produce. Because in that case, you already have the ones that you need to, if it's in form of dairy, where you can produce your milk instantly, and at the same time establish your dairy component of the farm. You also can afford to have the feedlot, where you can easily process for the purpose of both internal consumption and for export. But beyond that, now once you bring in this male and female, you are able to immediately begin to reprocreate, because it trains the cow almost as much as 9 months, just like the human being, to be able to conceive and deliver. And so, if it were to be something that can happen within 3 months, you can say, okay, bring in the embryo within a period of time, they can just get to fruition. So the kind of speed we are trying to push through, we are quite hopeful that the federal government posture that we are seeing is a support of our direction. Good enough, before we proceeded to Sao Paulo, we were also in Brasilia with officials of the federal government. The Minister of State for Agriculture was there, the Minister of Livestock was there, the Minister of Irrigation was there, and a whole lot of other federal government officials. And all of them were engaged in the bilateral talks, all with a view to building more like a much more robust economic ties between Nigeria and the Brazilian government. And the Brazilian government did well by also bringing out a number of their investors to interact with our own government officials and the other few investors that came with Mr. President to Brazil. But on our own part, we are going beyond what the federal government is doing, taking advantage of that window created by the federal government, and good enough, the federal government have also gone into bilateral service agreement with Brazil to the extent that you do not need to travel through Europe or the Middle East for you to access Brazil. Now, with this signing of the bilateral service agreement, in 7.5 hours from Lagos, you'll be able to land in Sao Paulo. Unlike the idea of spending as much as 17 hours to fly through Europe or to fly through the Middle East. And so it makes it easier for both our brothers and sisters who are doing business in Brazil, and at the same time, for those of us who may also want to engage in one form of trade with our Brazilian brothers. Good enough, we share a whole lot in common, culturally and even in terms of temperature. They also belong to the tropics, just like us. So a number of the crops that succeed in Brazil have the capability of also succeeding and surviving in Nigeria.
To move away from the rural electrification projects and the ranching system under the industrial agric revolution as intended by Delta State, and touch on some aspects of tourism and their sports economy as well. Brazil seems to be a leading giant in the world of sports. And when it comes to even their culture, over time they've partnered with states like Cross River in Nigeria under their carnival. Is Delta also looking at this knowledge exchange, maybe some sports academy coming in from Brazil to build the sporting talents of Delta youths? Would we be seeing other handshakes away from the much serious business of government, one that would also benefit interest of the masses at heart?
Well, let me start by telling you that even football or sport itself has also become a very, very serious form of both diplomacy and business. So it contributes to the economy of the different states or countries that are engaged in it. But what you must also understand that even in Nigeria, Delta State is number one when it comes to sports, be it the game of football or other form of sports. Of course, you've seen the number of times we made as number one in the national youth games, and of course, all the other sports that the entire country is engaged in. So, a handshake with Brazil, so it looks like we are talking to our brothers who also are in the same field with us when it comes to the issue of sports. So, in that regard, there's a whole lot that we share in common. I've also mentioned that culturally, there's a whole lot of ties between Nigeria and Brazil, and Delta being also a component of the Nigerian nation, also falls within that particular cultural inclination. Now, but when you also leave that and begin to talk about the kind of food they eat in Brazil, you also see a whole lot of similarities. For instance, by the time you see the moqueca, which is a particular delicacy in Brazil, you are just almost like dealing with what the Igbo people call ofesara, the kind of soup that you bring in banga and then do some form of processing, and then by the time you also eat it with eba, which they also have in Brazil, or pandelia, which they also have in Brazil, you will discover that we share a whole lot of in terms of cuisine, we share a whole lot in common. Now, if you also begin to look at the topography of Brazil, there's a whole lot of relationship with what you have in Nigeria. I was shocked when I got into Brasilia, the administrative capital of Brazil. So it says that even red sand, the kind of sand you also see in any of the major cities in Nigeria, it is also there in Brazil. So it also pleased God to almost give us the same kind of weather. So the climatic conditions that prevail or that is prevalent in Brazil is similar to that we also have. So that makes all of us to have some form of some tropical climatic conditions. So if that means that whatever crop that largely survives in Nigeria is most likely going to have more than 70% chances of also surviving in Brazil. So these similarities mean that in taking it further, there are a whole lot of advantages. I am happy that in the case of Delta, our governor has a whole lot of political will to push through this diversification for the purpose of the two reasons I have mentioned earlier, to bring about further security of our dear state, and indeed to create more jobs for our people, and by extension boost the standard of living of our people and increase our GDP. So with that in mind, I am very, very optimistic that we will continue to push through. He has given us responsibilities that he does not want where we just go to Brazil, get there, just talk, come back, talk, and nothing happens. The governor is the one pushing the processes, and with him in the driver's seat, be rest assured that this particular vehicle will get to the destination.
Well, I must appreciate you, Commissioner, sir, for taking out time to attend to these questions and grant us the interview. We appreciate you and are wishing you all the best in your time and endeavor.
Thank you very much. And let me also to you appreciate the management of ADBN. You are doing very, very well. And this partnership that we have continued to demonstrate will, by the grace of God, look forward to a more robust relationship between your medium and the Delta State government.
The compliment is well received, sir. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
And you too.
And that was Mr. Charles Aniagwu, who doubles as the Commissioner for Works, Rural Roads and the Public Information Officer of Delta State, bringing us up to speed on the true position of the government memos as signed by the head of service in the state, with the dress code as mandated for civil servants, saying it's not an entirely new memo, but a reintroduction just to remind them of the place of proper dressing and decent appearance whilst paying due diligence to their duties. He also harped on the outcomes of the Brazil investment tour with the bid to deploy ranching, a system that has boosted Brazil's agro sector in Delta, while also tapping into the Rural Electrification Agency project that would give alternative energy for agrarian communities in Delta.